Go. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this channel with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is a playwright and comedian. Her short play Misconnection won the 37th Samuel French Off-Broadway Short Play Festival. She is the author of the comedic hip-hop musical Locked Up Bitches and the plays Georgia Merching is Dead, Agnes, Everything is Probably Going to Be Okay, We Pray to Elephants, Assholes in Gas Stations, Rubber Ducks and Sunsets, and The Collective. She's a proud alum of the Obie Award-winning EST Youngblood and a company member of the Middle Voice Theater Company. She was a finalist for the City Theater National Award for Short Playwriting and the creator of the quarterly variety show We Are Animals, where she raps under her feminist hip-hop alias Chihuahua Fancy. She has received multiple commissions from the Sloan Foundation and teaches sketch comedy and playwriting at the People's Improv Theater. Her latest play, Arrowhead, opened February 9th at Atwater Village Theater in Los Angeles. Please welcome Catya McMullen. Hi, thanks for coming on.
That's an older bio.
Oh my God, then I can't wait to hear everything that you've been doing since. Are you still rapping?
Less since I've been out in Hollywood. I primarily, I'm a playwright through and through. Theater is the abusive relationship I'll be in for the rest of my life, forever and always. But since I started in film and television, I just can't rap about my vagina in basements as much anymore.
Fair enough.
That was a New York comedy thing that was, but yeah, hopefully Chihuahua Fancy will reemerge.
All right. So what did I miss? Update everybody on what you've been up to. Between Arrowhead and I guess Chihuahua Fancy.
That's actually a lot. That's actually still the bulk of my theater credits. So that is actually, it's totally accurate. I was just like, oh, the City Theater. Yes, that's right. I went to Miami. That's correct. Yeah. No. But a lot of it really has been, I've become way more intentional about theater.
Okay.
Because it is my home base, but now my writing career has expanded. So what that means is, for me, is that I just get to create work with people that I love. And really, I've had the privilege a little bit more, especially with Arrowhead, to do things a little bit more on my terms. I mean, Arrowhead's my first, I've had development, especially even in COVID, which was great. But Arrowhead's my first world premiere since EST world premiere Georgia Merching is Dead in 2019. And this is my first full production since then. Wow. And so it's been beautiful to return to the room.
So what shifted to really get to make theater the bulk of your life now?
I think theater, I still think actually film and television is the bulk of my life, but what that means is like I said, it really is just, I get to be so much more intentional. Mm-hmm. And I get to really ask myself the questions of what do I want to do? For me with writing, which this also goes into process a lot, is that when I'm stuck, I also ask myself, what is the story that's most obvious for me to tell? And then I go from there. That really was actually Georgia Merching is Dead. When I initially drafted, the first draft of that play, it was shortly after Trump was elected, and I was sitting in theaters. Because also just living in Los Angeles, New York, my life was so much more theater, and now here, the scales have been tipped, but I was sitting in these theaters and watching all of this work that was being created out of this apocalyptic fear. And I was like, if we keep telling stories about the end of the world's going to end. And so I was like, what can I do? What is most obvious for me to say right now? And then I wrote a love letter to my best friends. And that's the place that I always start from. And from there, it always organically unfolds. But so now it's just like, for Arrowhead, Ayama commissioned me a couple years ago. I finally, wrote the play, I don't know, like 2 years ago, maybe. Okay. 2.5, 3. What is time anymore?
I know, right? I think time got shifted after COVID.
Yeah.
We lost a few years there. And it's hard to,
Yeah. And time. Oh, I will say the other thing, actually, as you look at my credits, speaking of COVID, Jenna Worsham, who is my best friend, the closest thing I have to a sister, and also my lifelong collaborator who directed Arrowhead. We came up together. We met when we were 23 and 24 respectively, and have worked, and we really learned who we were working on my plays together as artists. But our hands were really tied, and we were feeling what most people were feeling in COVID, just this extreme feeling of uselessness. And also, for the first time, our jobs were to just stay home. And so we asked ourselves what we could possibly do. And from that, we created this thing called the Homebound Project. Mm-hmm. And it was in 2020. It started in about April. And really, we had a connection to No Kid Hungry, which is a campaign of Share Our Strength, which works to have food and which works to eradicate child hunger, essentially. And I think that is also a cause that is close to both of our hearts and personal in different ways. And so within 24 hours, we were on a Zoom with the head of No Kid Hungry and several of their staff members. And we reached out to our contacts who were prominent playwrights and actors. And we ended up doing six different shows. And we picked a theme. And then we got our favorite playwrights to write pieces for these actors, and we raised over $150,000 for No Kid Hungry. Wow. The participants, the people who ultimately stepped up and donated and donated their time. I mean, it was like Amanda Seyfried, who's a close friend of ours. She did several of them and was sort of, her and Tommy Sadowski her husband who's also a brilliant prominent actor. They were kind of like the faces of the Homebound Project. But then, I mean, Sting sang a song for us at one point, Janelle Monáe, Diane Lane, and it was, and then we had these beautiful Pulitzer Prize winning playwrights and then also emerging playwrights. It was just this beautiful cross section of people coming together. And so much of it is that in this period of isolation, we found one of the things that theater does best, which is we all felt a little bit less alone. And I think Lucy Thurber, who's one of my closest, nearest, dearest in the world and was my longtime mentor, she always likes to say that after food and shelter, we need stories, so we know we're not alone. Sure. And so we got to do that and create this contained thing that was very much a response to the moment that allowed us all to also stay home.
It was a unique period. For me, you were giving a unique opportunity, and for me, it was like, if I've got this time, I better have something to show for it when it's over. Yeah. And I think that that's how a lot of people should have approached it, rather than, taking a doom and gloom, viewpoint of it to where it's like, but no, you take advantage of this opportunity to do the things that you always never, quote unquote, never have time for. I'm not keen on I don't have time for that. You have time for it. Yeah.
It's so interesting though, because on one hand, yes, but then another thing that I faced was so much was happening. I mean, and then it's like COVID plus the uprisings plus, that there was so much happening and our nervous systems were so shot that there's also this profound pressure to do, create, go. And so for me, it was really this balance of, if I don't work, if I'm not having some sort of output with writing, I really, I do feel like I'm going insane because I'm not fully living who I am, but simultaneously also learning how to rest and not do something and realize that, because I think so many of us had so much pressure to create all this thing and use this time. And on one hand, I did need to do that. And on the other, I also had to really learn how to listen to myself and slow down and realize that I wasn't just sitting at home. I was having a full experience, some of which emotionally needed to be taken care of, which then made me a better writer, In
what way? How did it make you a better writer? What makes a good writer?
Oh God. I mean, what makes a good writer? Ooh, mental illness? No. I think the more I examine my own inner life and what's actually happening, the more I can put that into a piece of work and reflect it on stage. Over and over and over again, the more things are examined in me and the more that I'm able to heal whatever it is. Because I when I was younger, I really wrote from, at certain points, from this place of kind of like raw pain, and that was the way that I processed. But I found actually that I've really been able to have a much more effective conversation that is also more inclusive, and also that's work that I don't just feel like messy about. If I've actually done the inner work on myself of whatever it is, and that runs the gamut, to be able to really feel like I'm telling the truth about my own experience in an accessible way, or the experiences of the people I love. That, because I mean, like any playwright, you know, the people I love are baked into everyone I write, and like They are love letters. And so the clearer I am before I go in, I'm still able to sort of access whatever, you know, existential despair that a given play is touching on. But there's also something more. It's like, it really, that is the stuff that makes me a better writer. And then it's just part of the process of growing for me, is also reflecting that back. And then that's also part of how I don't feel alone.
So the idea or emotion or incident pops into your head that you're going to approach, you're going to write about. And then, so what happens next? Once you decide this is a play, I'm gonna write a play about this. This is what I need to.
A lot of times I hear the people. I'll hear a scene first, but I'm less. And I think, I mean, I can't speak universally, but I think a good play really comes from my guts as opposed to the ideas that I want to hit. And then it's about just following that instinct and letting it unfold. I mean, with Arrowhead, it was like, yo, I'm a year late on this commission. I should probably write a play to, you know, because they gave me money and they would like their play. But trust, it's like I feel like the concepts come later, unless it's something that I've been able to articulate this idea that speaks to something I care deeply about, you know. And my process over and over and over again is just that I write what I like, and which is a thing that took me a really long time, because when I was younger, I would just I had so much ambition. And I was working so many things out in terms of craft and the kind of writer that I am and who I wanted to be. But then it's like, when I was driven too much by the idea, it always fell short. And I always felt like this isn't fully who I am, right? As a writer, and this isn't totally what I want to do. But I find that, like, when I just start from a place of, this is a person I know, you know, which usually is some part of me, and then let that unfold, the ideas and the concepts always come. I mean, Arrowhead is my most like conceptually driven play in terms of it's the most sort of like talky idea play I've ever written.
Well, hang on, because you said something interesting. You said, well, I mean, it's your writing. You're writing. You're the person in control. So what? You write what you like. And you were falling short. Expand on that, because it's why would you write something that you don't want to write or that you don't like, or when you're the only person in control?
I think it's like, when I start from the ambition of this is what this should be, this is what I think I meant.
Sure.
So when I start from a place of this is what it should be, then that's where I get into some traps. And I remember I was workshopping. I was I was doing a workshop week out of town for my play Agnes, and I was really at a crossroads with my work where I was almost hitting it, you know, but it just felt like there was this line that I was like and everything. I mean, I was good, you know, and it was funny, and it was like hitting emotional beats, but there was like a cohesiveness, and there's a way that like a play can come together that I was just waiting for the moment where that full chiropractic happened. Right. And so, and I was just like, this is, I'm close, but like the way I know this can work, I haven't quite hit yet. And there was one morning before rehearsal where I was sitting in this coffee shop and at like 6 a.m. in North Carolina. And I just, I put aside the constraints of my ambition for the play, what it needed to do, what it needed to be about. I put aside all of that, and I just let this scene unfold. And it was like, it was just things that I purely liked.
I cannot remember the term that he uses. There's a writer who wrote a book, I think it's called The Playwright's Bible. And he refers to that, you know, talking to students, and this isn't the play the road that it's going is not what they intended to do. And in the way he talks about it, God, I really wish I can remember what that term was in the author's name. But it's like, you kind of don't have control. Mm-hmm. You just have to let it become the play that it's going to be, and not force it. And it sounds like that's kind of what was going on with you.
Also, I mean, it's funny, going back to college, I did a degree in theater, but I also did a thesis in short fiction, and I was in this like insane short fiction program called something. And I remember there was a point where we were all turning in these stories early in the year. And I think I actually wrote a story about Clowns Without Borders where they like went to Haiti, and it was like clowns in Haiti. I mean, it was like, and there were so many things that, I mean, it was just insane. And I remember we sort of had this kind of come to Jesus moment with our playwriting professor, and she said, if it, like, this is not personal to you all. Like, you are not revealing yourselves in the way that you're all capable of. And then the next day I sat down and I wrote a story that was incredibly personal to me, felt almost too obvious for me to write. And it ended up being, I mean, it ended up getting a lot of response. It ended up, you know, it was beautiful, and it was honest, and it was unapologetically me in a way that, like, I was trying to be and do so many things. And what I've found is that I've actually been able to be and do those things just from when I start from a simpler place. It always unfolds.
Do you think it's necessary to have it be personal, or have that element of personal, not personality, but yeah, you have to make it personal. No matter what it is, you have to add it has to come from a personal place, no matter what the subject is that you're writing from.
Yeah, I mean, for me it does. Because, and then some of it is what is personal is also the reflection of people I love. And that in itself is personal. There's like a lot of experiences in Arrowhead. At its heart, the story is very much some of my own experience, not all of it, but there's sort of two leads, and one of them is like, it's not, she and I do not have the same experience, but it felt so important for me as a love letter. And as some of the ideas are incredibly painful. And the point of that play is definitely that it's a dialectic. Like, you walk out of there and the point is that everything that we're talking about is complicated.
Right.
But so part of what's personal is the infusion that can happen in these characters, and really, like, I think, yes, personal experience, and then also empathy. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Sure. And I'm not saying that you have to write something personal, but I think that you have to, no matter what that scene's about, it has to, you have to insert something personal to it, if that makes sense. It has to mean something, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I think so too. I mean, listen, we're in a it's an art form that's all about character.
Sure.
And if I'm not putting myself in there, and there's usually in every character, right, there's a little to a lot of me that's infused in each and every one of them.
Why? I would have to say that's. I think that's true in every playwright, in every character. I think there's always an element of yourself that's there.
Of course, and then it's like, but also that's been, as I've gotten older and I've worked more, that's been another way that I've felt. I mean, I think playwrights, especially, I think human beings are weirdos, but most of us have walked through our lives not feeling understood. And so the things that have surprised me in a way that I felt really alone with my own experience, even if the experience isn't the same, I've engaged so much with people finding themselves and the catharsis that happens in that, where the more I tell the truth about myself, even if it's some of the ugly stuff too.
Oh yeah.
It like that is so much of what people respond to. And then I'm a comedy writer through and through. I mean, my artistic mission is to use humor to access vulnerability. And so it's like my hope, I mean, Jenna Worsham said once that like the hope with this play that we're working on right now is to laugh our way into a deeper conversation. And that is what I aim to do over and over and over again. And that sums up my life's work, basically.
You said you write with more intention now, or more intentionally.
I think the things I choose to do are more intentional. So how do you mean? Well, I used to have several plays on my docket, and I was in all these writers groups, and I was doing the hustle of a New York playwright. And now this is the only piece of theater. I mean, we did some workshops in COVID and stuff of other plays, but this was the one theater thing on my desk, or at least has been, especially for the last 2 years. And then it's like as this opens and hopefully it has another life, then there's, I know what the next play I'm going to write is, and I don't necessarily know when I'm going to be able to write it. But that I think is what's intentional, as opposed to all of my creativity was funneled into different theater projects for so long. And now it's just like one at a time.
Got it. What does that mean to the New York City hustle is from a playwriting perspective? How does that, this is new to me.
In summation, it's so hard. I graduated college and I got a piece of advice to write 10-minute plays. And so I started learning how to write 10-minute plays, which I think is, if you're starting out as a playwright, is incredibly important, in part to build relationships and to have some production experience. But really, so it was writing short plays and putting those up, and then really, like, in any the business element of in any industry around an art form, you're kind of throwing a bunch of stuff up against the wall and hoping somebody pays attention. But really, I think the way a lot of us have come up is you like apply for these free opportunities and you join a writer's group for a year, and that becomes or sometimes longer, and that becomes not only your home, but also it becomes a resume credit, and then it's like you're like doing all of these things, short works and long works, and trying to get readings and trying to do all this other stuff to get into the right rooms. But it's this and this isn't everybody's experience by any means, but I think it's a lot of ours is it's just you're hustling for these free opportunities just to try to get some level of recognition and be in certain rooms, and then maybe hopefully get an agent, and then hopefully they're good at their jobs.
Does this become a competition, or is it just coming from a place of pressure? Or is it sounds like it's that Hollywood thing where I gotta beat somebody, or it's like there's, it's I gotta be better than this person. I gotta have something happen before, and I'm not. Yeah. You know what I mean? No, yeah. Like we do that. Totally, it's like, know what you mean. It's not coming from a place of support. No. Of like, congratulations, where it's like, Okay. You got that.
Yeah.
That should have been me.
I think that's true with any art form. And
I think it depends on the market. I think it's
But
those larger
no.
markets that everybody, like, it becomes this competition, whereas in smaller markets, it's just, there's more of a support. It seems like LA, and I don't know if you have this experience, but I swore that I was going to, if I ever opened a theater company up, it was going to be called obligatory theater, because that's what it is in LA. It's people who come to see you. You have to have gone to somebody else's play in order for them to come see yours, and that's what it is. It's a give and take. That it's just
It's transactional.
100%. It's
Yeah.
actors supporting other actors, because LA's just not a theater town.
It's not a theater town, no. And we've started, Arrowhead have started to pull some audiences, and I Am a Theater Company is doing a lot to get people in the house who wouldn't necessarily go see a play. And I think for some of that, it is actually about queer community. But yeah, no, I mean, I think with the competition, yes, I think theater is also, because of financial constraints, because of the culture, way more so in New York than LA. It is so driven by scarcity in a way that can really impact the values. And I do think, I know a lot of artists, especially when they're younger, who experience that level of competition. Because for me, it was just like, I knew what I was doing was good. And I was like, when is someone going to actually pay attention? And it was baffling to see other people get opportunities. But I actually hit a personal crossroads of, I realized I wasn't happy for other people. And I realized I was never going to be happy if I could not experience generosity and joy and the celebration of other people's work, which the more doors were closed in my face, the harder it was to do. And that I think also now is part of what is intentional about what I do, because I've gotten to go back to, I do theater because, I mean, compulsively, because I'm insane, but also because I deeply love it. And I'm going to be really intentional about the people that I choose to work with. And also because I don't want the same things that I wanted when I was 25.
Sure.
Yeah. And I don't have the same ambition in my theater career, which, like, again, I will be writing plays for the rest of my life. I feel almost completely confident of that. You never know, but that it's like, when the ambition of like trying to get these specific opportunities or work at these specific theaters or work at all of this stuff, I lost myself, and I actually found, in this weird way, Hollywood's been way nicer to me than theater. And so, what are the values that I operate in, and what kind of work can I make? And that's not prohibitive that suddenly a play will hit and maybe I'll do it at a place that I always wanted to work, but that's not the point of it anymore. It's been able, I think, because my writing career has expanded so much, that there's just space for me to not have the same ambition, and then it's just the joy of it.
So what changed to make you more of a generous person when it came to being happy for your friends or your competition, if you will?
Well, so much of that, I think, is driven by the deep dissatisfaction that I had in my own life, and the deep dissatisfaction that I had in my own work. And so how can I fill my own cup? I find across the board, not just in theater, but one of the things that I really discovered was I was really struggling financially. It was like, I felt like I had hit this ceiling. And I was, I had some plays that were about, like, The Flea was about to do Locked Up Bitches. Georgia Merching Is Dead had just had a workshop production. And then they were like, we want to do this play, right? So it was like I was having, Ensemble Studio Theater was going to produce my play. And they have always been my theater home. And all this stuff. But I was just like, I feel like there's this ceiling and I don't know how to get through it. And one of the things that I've found, and this ties into how I've learned how to be really happy for other people most of the time, right? Like there are certain friends of mine who I've come up with who I still have to be really intentional about. There is enough for everyone, and not resent somebody's success. Or I think there are ways that playwrights can be anointed in theater where I'm always like, that guy? Okay. But really I found that whenever I'm struggling in my career, if there's no immediate thing that is like, oh, this is something I need to correct, I look at the other areas of my life where I'm hurting or where I'm struggling, and I work on those. I don't, like, if I'm beating my head up against the wall in my career, then I slow and pause as much as humanly possible and really go towards areas of my life that have nothing to do with my career. And I've found that when I have healed those and have engaged in the work in those, suddenly opportunities open up that otherwise weren't there.
Right. I want to talk about this commission because you said I got paid. I should probably write it.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting with playwrights who receive this, and I'm surprised that it's like, all right, I got to get to work, and they don't do it right away. But one, how do you get a commission, and then why the gap? Because you're the second one that I've talked to who is like, I think the other person that I talked to about it hasn't even done it yet. And it's been like years. So, I mean, how does one get a commission, first of all?
I mean, it totally depends it just totally depends. I had a relationship with Iama. They had done a couple readings of plays of mine. And I just, we just had a really friendly relationship, and they really loved my work, and we're very mutually fond of each other. And they approached me. They said, we want you to write a play for us. And so for that, it was really like a personal, professional relationship, where they just wanted it. I think sometimes playwrights develop relationships, especially whether or not it's through representation, with theaters that have some money, and that's where the commission comes from. It's just like, I think it can come from all different places. Right. There's also all different scales of commission. And so I think it really, really varies. But sometimes it's just like they like you, and they say, can you do something that's for us? But and then for the delay, I mean, I've never written something across the board that was like, oh, I'm going to write this thing and then I'm going to see what happens with it. And I learned that I knew that about myself really early on when I was first starting out. I got that piece of advice to write 10-minute plays. And I was like, I'm never just going to sit down and write a bunch of 10-minute plays. It's not going to happen. So for me, having deadlines, but not only deadlines, but people that I'm accountable to, especially if there's a table read, that is the only way that I get stuff done. Writing things in a vacuum, I'm never going to do. So I created this thing called the September Challenge when I was, 23. I did it for 2 or 3 years. And I emailed some actors who I knew and loved. And I said, I'm setting out to write a 10-minute play a week. On this day for a month. And on this day, I'm going to, make you pancakes or something. Can you come over to this living room and read them? Because otherwise I won't write them. And then also in New York, like I found with writers groups and I found with various other opportunities, it was just like, I knew I needed to find a place to go. I think that's where classes are really helpful. Right. It wasn't about learning craft. It was just about, I knew that there were days where I would have to bring in pages, and I felt a little bit a part of something. And this was definitely before I was in more writers groups and all this stuff. And it was just, it's been so crucial. And even now I need a day where there are actors at a table, and that's how I'm going to get something done. And I also write fast, but also I think the other thing is it takes me a long time to figure out where I am, and then I write fast. So I used to be like, okay, well, what's procrastination and what's just the necessary staring at a wall? And with that, I've really found that I have a mentor or former mentor who was like, when you watch Netflix or whatever, she's like, you are actually working because you never stop working.
Right.
And that puts some of the pressure off, you know. And I've really experienced, I've had this movie that I've been writing that's like the hardest thing that I was hired to write, that's like the hardest and most ambitious thing I've ever tried to do. And like, so much of it has been the pace of actually cranking out pages for the first draft was really, really painstakingly slow, in part because there was so much time that was needed to just figure out where I am. And that's also what's, I mean, first drafts are I hate them so much. They're my least favorite. Good writing, I think, is all in revision.
Sure.
And I think, especially with a play, I need actors, I need a table, I need a director, I need all of these things. And there's a beautiful thing where actors become part of the bones of a play. But I've learned to listen to it like a piece of music. And so you hear it, right? We all do. We all, even if you don't know anything about theater, you hear when something's a little weird. And so I've only been able to really discover the architecture of what that is by being in a room. And that's one of the things that makes theater so special and indispensable for me, is there's a symbiotic relationship.
So first draft happens. What's your next step?
I hear it. I try not to sit under the table or eat my hair.
Okay, when you say hear it, all right, what does that mean?
Table read.
Okay.
Sit at a
living
table.
room.
Luckily, like, I mean, I have done things in my living room. Luckily, it's like with my relationships with various places and theaters and whatever, I've been able to not have to really do that. And I just use the resources of wherever it is that is my home base. And then, and I hear it. Sometimes, I mean, I also find that in workshop weeks after, which is usually like after the first draft, I love to play Tetris. I work at the table, you know, I rewrite things in room and then we hear them, you know. It's very much an active, engaged process, as opposed to like, I hear stuff and then I go away and then I hear it again. I mean, there is a certain level of what's necessary of just like, oh, nope, first draft, it's usually like, oh, none of that works. Or this is, you know, this is what it wants to be. That's kind of part of the way I uncover what something wants to be.
So are you, correct me if I'm misinterpreting this or misunderstanding. So are you saying that are you stopping during this reading? Say, hang on. Let me rework that real quick. Let me do this. Let's try this out first, and then go back, or do you sit and listen to the whole entire thing first? I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that, and then there's a question that I have after.
I don't usually, if I'm here, especially for the first draft of a play, I won't do that. And then usually, if I have a workshop week, which is where I get so much work done. Because I'm really good in like spurts that are contain spurts. We'll usually hear the play fully, and then as we work through scene by scene, that's where I'll stop and be like, okay, wait, hold please. Or and Jetta Worsham is actually like she might be a genius. She's really incredible at playing Tetris. We had the most athletic game of script Tetris I've ever seen from her, which is literally, she'll be like, okay, these 4 lines on 61, you're going to read those, and then we're going to cut to 92 and read this half page, and then we're going to go back to 54. And it's like putting the scenes together in a way that it's like, because sometimes it's like, it's just in the wrong place, or you're hearing something for pace. And sometimes it really is like cutting and moving forward, and because a lot of times I draft and it's like it's all there, but it's in the wrong order.
I want to really delve into this because it sounds fascinating. It sounds so helpful and beneficial. Now, when you're jumping to these different places, are these scenes connected, or do they not have anything to do with each other? And why? Is it just random pages, or you know that, okay, on 54 this is happening, and 96 this happens because it's correlated with this, but it might affect 27?
It's
I
more,
wanna,
no, totally. It's more like actually this full conversation, if I've split something up and it's in 2 scenes in the draft right now, and actually it would be much more beneficial to do it in one, it's more about like, oh no, this conversation and this conversation actually belong next to each other. Or if it's a pace thing, because my plays kind of end up ramping up, and I mean, slow is where my plays go to die. And in Arrowhead in particular, but it's true of a lot of pretty much all my plays. Arrowhead it's not a farce at all, but it kind of, there's a section that builds to the climax that turns into a little bit of a noises off quality. And in order to get that right, it was about rearranging a lot of things and moving them together. And then it was just like, bam, 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 bam. And so it's a lot of ways that the fat is trimmed. It wasn't, most of the time it's not 54, 94.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
sure.
Most of the time it's like 54, and then we're going to jump to 57,
right.
And then we're going to jump back.
And are these conversations, is this dialogue between the same characters or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or it's just reordering things.
Right.
It's like totally reordering scenes, usually with some cuts or some whatever, or it's like one thing that's in a scene that was cut that's important, or one thing that actually works better in another scene, moving it around, and then you can really, and then you can really hear it.
Right. What other things are happening or transpiring? What else are you doing during this workshop week? This is fascinating. I like this concept. I've never heard this approach. So you got your first draft. You've probably fixed some things. You come back to the table. To this workshop week, and what else are you doing besides the Scene Tetris?
Well, it's a lot of it's not Scene Tetris. It's like that will just sometimes happen.
Okay.
We're not just playing like that.
No, I know there's more to
totally,
it. So I'm like, what other exercises or things that you're doing to fix these? Yeah. Not necessarily plot holes, but these gaps or the flow or all that stuff. What else? What other things do you do?
So sometimes I'll write in room and I'll realize, oh no, this is actually what this person needs to say right here.
And when you say in room,
in the workshop room, we're
okay.
sitting around a table, we're just reading scenes, and sometimes it's like I'll hear a scene and we'll talk about it, because there's also a lot of discussion and questions, and it's really, I really want to hear. I'm intentional about the people I'm in a room with, and I really want to hear what they have to say. And if there's something that's way off track, we'll move on or whatever. But also sometimes I don't know that certain things are confusing, and then I'm able to sort of course correct, or if what people have taken away is so different. And then sometimes it's like I'll hear a scene and we'll work on it, but I know that there's too much to do. So when I'm at home, I write super early in the mornings when I'm on deadlines. And so I'll go home and then I'll get up at 5 or whatever and do a new pass at the scene. Or we'll realize like, oh, these two characters don't have a scene together, and we actually really need it. And so it's a balance of all different types of discovery processes, and really depends on what the play needs in the moment for wherever we are.
How involved are the other people in the room? How collaborative is it, and what are the boundaries of their involvement?
It really depends. It really depends. If I'm working with somebody like Jenna, who is a new play wizard and I can't speak highly enough about all of her level of goods, but then there'll be, usually I'll have like side conversations with whoever the director is, and really, or if it's like with the theater company, whatever artistic leadership thinks. And then, it really does depend. And there are certain actors who my work is really specific, and until you figure out what it is, you're scrambling, because it's tonally incredibly athletic, and varied. And that was one of the big things when I was younger that that line that I was trying to cross, because everything is so multitonal and needs to fit together, that it's like about allowing that to be harmonious. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think it's like sometimes it's people asking a lot of questions, sometimes it's people giving a lot of POV. A lot of times that conversation is also driven in part by the director knowing what I want and need to do. And then sometimes it's like we're trying different things to hear it, you know. There are certain actors where I want to hear less what they have to say, you know, or if their instincts are super wrong, or if they've never really been engaged in new work processes like this. So the answer is it really varies. And then there are some who I've worked with for years who are brilliant, who also understand fully. And then it's about going from there. And I have a trained enough ear because I've been doing this long enough that I can hopefully hear when I'm listening to a scene or whatever, what is the script doesn't work and what is the actor hasn't figured it out yet.
Right. How do you, those actors that you don't want to hear so much from, or anybody else for that matter, it doesn't necessarily have to be an actor, how do you not dismiss or do you dismiss? I don't know how do you deal with that?
It's an artful navigation. Also, that's sometimes where a director is incredibly helpful. But sometimes I'm just like, no, that's not totally what it is, in a generous way. I just really think that no matter what, it's about making the people in the room feel appreciated, because if they're not, then we're not going to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And also, I'm very specific and you can't always get this, but in theater rooms and rehearsal rooms, but also in a television writer's room, like that there's an element of continuing to sort of lift people up while also I'm somebody who's also very clear about the vision of what it is. And I'm very clear a lot of times about the things that I don't know. But yeah, so the answer is like, it kind of depends on the person. It kind of depends on a gauge of their sensitivities. A lot of it in a workshop or just in general in a rehearsal room, is dependent on the director and their navigation. Sometimes it's just like, that's an interesting thought. I will think about it. Thank you.
Sure.
You know? So it's not, yeah.
Are you presenting your intention and the things that you don't know beforehand? It's like, okay, guys, real quick, just before we start, this is where I'm going with this. These are things that I'm still trying to figure out and I don't know. So keep an eye out, or do you just kind of, I know that internally, I know what my intention is. I know where the holes are. I'm not going to share that necessarily. I'll wait until I hear if I am indeed correct that there's something missing there, or just like, oh, maybe that did work and I wasn't aware.
It depends. I think sometimes it's less useful to point out the shortcomings until after. Okay. So a lot of times, but usually if I'm listening to a full draft, whether it's just a one-day thing or if it's part of a larger process, afterwards I will ask questions.
Okay.
The ways that I like discussions to go, which again, it's also great when a director is leading them, but this is my intention. But also if it's just me and a new piece of work, then that's then I will lead it, of just like, let's start conversations with what you like. You know what I mean?
Sure. Okay. Great.
And then, because then I'm fighting to hear, because we all get insecure, you know?
Oh, yeah,
even if I know something's good or working or whatever, I still, tell me I'm a pretty pony. And then questions. Like, I love discussion to be framed in the questions that they have. And then I can walk through my own questions that I have. So it's like, sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I mean, that doesn't fucking work yet. Or sometimes I like didn't know how to finish a scene, so I'll just write like a stupid stage direction that's like, sometimes I'll just be like, I'll do better, or like, this is a mess, keep going, But it really depends. Like sometimes I'll acknowledge the thing, but a lot of times if it's something that I haven't figured out yet, I'll say like, what do you think about this? You know, or I'll ask a question. Because I also find that not everybody knows how to give feedback in a writer-friendly way, no matter who they are, whether they're artistic leadership or not. I got this really great piece of advice when I was pretty young is so beneficial, and hopefully it'll be beneficial to somebody else, that when somebody gives you notes on a play, most people's instincts, we all are familiar with story. We all know what works and what doesn't. You know, like we all can hear it and feel it, but sometimes people are going to give you a prescriptive solve.
Right.
And those are usually wrong. So it's actually about hearing the note, learning how to decode the note behind the note to understand what it is that they're responding to. And then I'm going to have my own, and then I'm going to have my own solves that are usually much better because I'm in it and it's mine. And so really learning how to navigate that. And then I know how to ask follow-up questions. Or if I'm faced with prejudice, sometimes I will, in as kind a way as possible, be like, would you say that if that character wasn't a woman, you know, or whatever else.
Right. Yeah, I just did a playwriting workshop at a high school theater festival, and the piece of advice that I was given, and I've been using it, I hope it's correct, is that because sometimes like people like to give that note where it's like, oh, you should do this. This would be great. If this character did this, that would be really awesome. And I'm like, and the piece of advice that I was given was like, just ask questions. Mm-hmm. Don't let them, you know, rewrite your play, if you will. That's their play. Yeah. Have them go write that.
Yeah.
Because this is yours, and you know, so, you know.
Well, yeah, and some of it is understanding the global thing of taste of what kind of play somebody else is craving and their ambition for my work. And then some of it really is, a lot of times it's like, they'll be like, well, if he does this or whatever it is, like he should do this, and it's really being like, okay, so this person is saying this, is there validity to it, or are they totally missing the mark? But also it's just like, what are they saying about that character and something that's missing in the story, or just like not quite right yet, you know, and can I translate that to, is it true? Does it speak, you know, and can I translate that to something that is more actionable? Because sometimes it's just like they're craving more action, or they're craving a character to be more motivated, or they're like, it's like they really, what they're saying is that they don't understand what this character wants, but like the way that they translate that is like, he should go blow up the boat or whatever it is. And you're like, huh, okay.
Are you involving them in that translation? Are you asking, what do you mean by that? Or are you just saying, okay, I'm going to take that, right? What do they mean? And are you just giving it your own interpretation, or are you asking questions when they do that? It
completely depends on my relationship with the person, and also their relationship to, sure. So if it's an artistic director, for example, or something like that, I might say, that's a really interesting thought, and then see if I can sometimes it's just like, I gotta go think about it, you know?
Right.
And sometimes it's like, I wonder about that as the solution, but is that speaking to this thing that you're craving, you know? And try to identify what the note behind the note is to them, and have a clarifying conversation. But on a baseline, they have to be somebody that I respect. But also, a lot of times I'll walk out of a reading or a workshop week knowing totally what it is that I still need to do that's a more substantial work than just something where it's like fixing lines in room. And sometimes I'll pitch it back being like, well, actually, like that kind of speaks to this solve and what I'm going to do in the next draft, which is this, this, and this, you know? But again, the actual answer to your question is, it's like totally relationship based. Do I respect the person? Or is it like, are they involved in a meaningful way in the play that also I want to make sure people feel heard and understood?
Sure. Where was I going to go with that? I totally lost my train of thought. I hope the passenger's okay. When I'm going to go in a different direction now instead, and then I'll come back to it in a moment. So because I am curious how does one approach a hip hop musical?
Oh boy. Oh wait, I did have one other thought in the feedback thing. Is I've learned to the more and more, or the less and less insecure I've become, and the less and less, because I get I hate the word triggered, but like I get super triggered when I don't feel understood, especially if I don't know where I am yet or where I'm going. But the more like I've learned to not be defensive because I'm confident in what I know that I'm going to do. And now, luckily, my history and experience, people trust me in what I have to say, which wasn't true when I was first starting out. But the less defensive I am in those conversations, and the more open of just like somebody can have the dignity of their own experience and POV, then it's not about me fighting to be understood or fighting for somebody to like, and that's been really helpful. How do you write a hip hop musical? I mean,
I know the question came back. We'll get to the hip hop musical in just a second. The question that I did have was: is it just deadlines that keep your motivation to write, or do you have other things that? I mean, resistance is hard to overcome. Yeah. So I'm curious. Besides deadlines, if there's other tricks that you have, or other things that motivate you to, I got to sit down and write, rather than just deadlines.
Occasionally it will be like a scene will come out, or like characters won't leave me alone. I have a play that has not, and a lot of times it's like it takes a couple years. Like sometimes a thing will haunt me for several years, and then finally I'll sit down to write it. And usually that time ultimately ends up working out in a beautiful way where like that is the moment. But so I'll do smaller things or smaller chunks, or like discover some stuff and I have to get it down, and not like, but I think because this is my job, I no longer rely on inspiration. I actually can't. And I also trust the fact that I'm going to sit down and some days are going to work and some days it's not. And that's actually just doing my job. And so taking some of the pressure off that and off the pressure off inspiration has been really useful. But like in terms of tricks, I mean, my big one is if I'm going to finish something or get close to finish something, I need to be accountable to other people.
Right. Okay.
And there are people who are way more motivated than I am. I am not a write every day unless I have a deadline person. Mm-hmm. And I felt some shame about that because, whatever, Stephen King's in his office. But actually, because like I said, the work also is always happening because I always have, the way I thrive, I never am writing one thing at a time.
Right.
There's always 7 things on my desk, and it's important because I write in such a range of different types of things and I need many of those wings of myself satisfied, which actually goes into the answer to your next question. Of how do you write a hip hop musical?
Yep, let's do it. Let's hear it. How do you do it?
Well,
and what was the inspiration behind it? And why a hip hop musical? Not that, just.
No, totally.
It's not a conversation that's happened in the show yet.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, I'm real white, you know what I mean? So it's like there's not a big lane for me in hip hop appropriately. How it came about was actually totally sideways, and also might be helpful or creatively stimulating or something. Every time I've struggled in my career, not only has it been important for me to work on the other parts, but also it was in this period, and that's how We Are Animals started, which then was, I think, a segue to Locked Up Bitches. I kept getting the note that my jokes were overwhelming the heart of my plays. And
what does that mean?
It means I was like writing too many bits from like a sketch place, or like, and I was like, oh, if that's true, for me to be able to navigate the plays that are a little bit more serious while still comedies, because my comedy is still like it's rough, you know. It gets real rough. And so I was like, oh, I just need to satisfy that part of me somewhere else. And whenever there were points where I was getting a bunch of rejections, or it felt like doors were closing in my face, or like I always go back to how can I create community and how can I satisfy and do something that's just for me. And so initially then it was just like starting sketch comedy. It's like I haven't taught at the People's Improv Theater for years. But that was really amazing. And so what happened was, the Flea Theater has this episodic short play competition, with their acting company, the Bats. And every week, it was started by Steve Stout and Dominic Spillane many years ago. And every week the actors are split up into teams, and it's like a raucous time, you know, and the drunker the audience is, the better. It's like super late night. It's like, and so what happens is writers have like 2 days to write, and it's serialized. So writers have 2 days to write for their group of actors, the first episode or whatever it is in the installment of whatever this story is, and then the audience gets drunk and then votes for their 3 favorites, and then those 3 move on to the next episode, and then the new teams come back with a brand new play. And so I was working with a friend of mine named Michael Rain, who was a resident director at the Flea, and is the person who never says no to me, no matter how outrageous. There was a point where I was like, can we have risky business Tom Cruise dancers? And he said, what if we had a 15-foot puppet? You know? And I was like, I love you so much. I love you so much. I don't even know I can't contain my feelings right now. And really it was just like, I was just like really struggling with all of these different things. And so I was like, let's go do something stupid in a basement. And Locked Up Bitches, the premise of it is it's a hip hop musical parody mashup of Orange is the New Black and West Side Story set in an animal shelter. So it's like, it's about a bitch who loves a pussy. But it's about a turf war between the dogs and the cats over the kitchen. And so really it was just like, let's do this stupid serial, you know, like let's go have some fun. And we did that. And it was a success. I mean, it was a very beloved serial that lasted, that ran a decent amount of time. And I mean, listen, I've always loved hip hop. I've always rapped. Like I mostly do comedy, feminist comedy hip hop, because like that's the only real lane I ever need to occupy. And so from there, it was just like, I was like, let's do this as a hip hop musical just cause, you know? And every week I wrote a 15-minute hip hop musical in 2 days. It's like, and these kids just like threw down and left it all on, like all of their guts were on the stage. Like it was unbelievable. And when we were done, there was actually at the pit, some of the shows transferred, and so we started basically doing it, and then I joined the cast because I wasn't in the original cast, and we just started doing it. We were basically like working on it live for several years. I think like somewhere between 70 and 100 actors have been in Locked Up Bitches at any given point, and we just started working on it and doing it, and we did several runs of the show, and then the Flea came back to us and they said, it's our first season in this new, I don't know, like $18 million theater complex. We're doing a season of women. And they came back and they were like, we want to do Locked Up Bitches. And we did it with a cast of 27. But how it became a hip hop musical was just like, it's a wing of my work that I loved and felt like decently good at, you know, and just like, it was just instinct. And then from there, it was just like, it all kind of emerged, and it was just this wild, sometimes beautiful, sometimes disgusting, sometimes like very confusing, some like just party that we threw for like several years. And it was so fun. It was just, and then we found a heartbeat to it, you know, and it just was, we just wanted to throw the weirdest, queerest party we could, and we wanted everybody to be able to walk into the theater and see at least some part of themselves reflected on stage, which is what I want to do for everything I do. And it was such a blast. But the answer is like, I don't know. I just like wanted to do that. It started as like a stupid, I mean, I always say like it started as a stupid joke in a basement that lasted 3 years.
Wow. What, where can people find your rapping? Is it anywhere online? Do you have an album?
It's funny because before I got my first job in television, I was going to record an EP. And then that has taken, I mean, there are videos online, but I mean, a lot of it was just like, I rapped it a lot of in our own shows, in We Are Animals. And then in like, there technically are videos online, but like, maybe Chihuahua Fancy will do an EP at some point, and then I can tell you and your listeners can find them.
So that's all it takes is just Google searching Chihuahua Fancy. Is that what's in it? And it's just going to pop up on YouTube?
Or just, I mean, I still don't want to advertise this because it's like crazy, but me on YouTube, if you look for me, not just Chihuahua Fancy, because some of them aren't labeled as Chihuahua Fancy. That was just an alias that I created for We Are Animals that then kind of took over. But really it was just like I did a lot of Planned Parenthood type fundraisers and like late night comedy things that didn't always, it wasn't like I've done like a music video or something. It was just like, it was this thing I did that sometimes people asked me to do.
That's awesome.
But feel free to not like.
You're just asking people to do it now.
I know so feel free to. There's no way. There's just I'm in a corner. It's crazy.
How do you write comedy in a play? And know that it's working.
That's you gotta be in a room for. I mean, sometimes. I mean, now it's like I've been doing this long enough, and I've logged my 10,000 hours. So
sure, okay.
And also it really speaks to what, like the appropriate tone of the comedy depends on the thing that I'm writing, which again, like sometimes it's a funny play about suicide and sometimes it's locked up bitches where it's, you know, people and actors in dog and cat ears, like rapping about their genitals, you know, it's really, like it really changes, but it's like, I mean, the answer is I've always been a comedy person, even though a lot of my writing is actually really serious. And so it's just been about like being appropriate, and it's just been about like learning how to write jokes and learning how to, I've just learned and tried, and it's been what's appropriate.
Is there a structure to it? Is there a structure to writing comedy and playwriting? Obviously there's a setup and a delivery or punchline or
it all follows the same structure, right? Like,
and what is that?
It's all basics. It's just really actually it's more about existing in, I find that it's more about finding the structure of the story as opposed to a bit, you know?
Yeah.
Or as opposed to making a joke work. Like, and for me, it's always been a natural and organic process. So I don't really, that's the biggest answer to your question. But it's always about making the story work, not trying to make it funny.
Right.
And then for me, it's really been about finding actors who are comedy people, while also being actors, you know. But it's like, but comedy is not like a separate thing. This executive I worked with once, she was like, I realized comedy and horror are actually the same genre because it's the worst thing happening. But again, like, it's just like, make your story work.
All right. So is the comedy coming as you write, or are you going back in and like, where can I be funny?
Comedies, yeah, I mean, for me, it just comes naturally as I write, not to be like, I'm just naturally, fun. No, it emerges organically. I mean, I also try to write characters, or it's not even try, I just like end up in part as these love letters, and also because I'm a goober, you know, write characters who, like people who, the funniest people I know are the most broken ones. And so it's like, I'm trying to find the profound and the stupid and the stupid and the profound. and over and over and over again. And so I love writing characters who otherwise you would not take seriously, who are a punchline in another play, and also taking them seriously in a way that everybody has their moment in one of my plays. Everybody has their journey. Like, even characters that you might think are ancillary characters are just not, like, they all hurt and want things, but the way that they communicate is funny and ridiculous. But yeah, it's like, it's all just been feeling it out. And that's also another thing where working at the table and workshopping and hearing things in room and all of this stuff has been, it's crucial for me to be like, oh, that doesn't work. Or, oh, fuck, what if we did this right here? You know, like, I'll hear it or I'll get inspired at the table and know, like, oh my God, that, you know, or in a rehearsal process, we'll suddenly be like, oh, that thing, you know?
So are you putting them in a situation, or is the comedy in the dialogue, or is it both?
All of the above, you know? Again, I just sit down to write. I just sit down to write as truthfully as possible. And what comes out is hopefully funny. But it's less of like, I'm going to write this to be funny. And it's more what I find is, and I find this more in film and television because I have way more autonomy in theater, of really protecting the tone of like, it's important for there to be a brightness. It's important for me for this to be funny. You know, we're going to get the emotional things that we want way more. Comedy makes the like vulnerability and the deep pain and whatever it is way more accessible, you know, because I never want to watch something that's just like a bummer.
Sure.
And I'm gonna get, we're gonna get you if you're laughing your way there.
I know Arrowhead's opened.
Yes.
Outside of that, what are you working on now?
I don't have a play on my desk because I just finished Arrowhead. And the script is locked, obviously, because we opened. And so I have some film and TV projects. So I'm writing this wild movie. I've worked a lot in comic book adaptations, and it's an adaptation of a Garth Ennis comic book called Marjorie Finnegan, Temporal Criminal, that I'm doing with Ruben Fleischer, who's an amazing film director, and then Margot Robbie's company, Lucky Chap, is producing, and it's just like, it's just this like, it's so wild. And then I have another pilot that I'm writing and some other stuff in the works, but it's like, you always kind of have to have so many pots cooking at once. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. And then I'm also sort of craving my next big thing. And there's a play that I kind of know what my next play is, and I've started a little bit, but it's just like the when of it.
Sure. Yeah. And then on that note as well, where can people find your work?
You can buy my plays. You can buy them. Like Agnes and Georgia Merching is Dead are published by DPS. I have some short plays published and monologues and stuff published too. And then I've written for some TV shows and stuff. And then I've written for some stuff that, you know, some of the stuff in film and TV, I've loved the things I've gotten to work on. And then some of it too, it's like you'll be able to see in the near future, hopefully. Nice.
And then are you on the socials?
I am. I got a private Instagram, but that doesn't stop people from following me. It's at McCatya, but I'm not like an ex person. It's sure. Like it's all. I got enough writing to do. You know what I'm saying?
It's so there's no TikTok. There's no Snapchat.
I don't even know how to. I've learned how to open.
You don't
TikTok.
know how to talk?
Oh no, I definitely know how to talk. I'm like an Olympic athlete of talking. It's just like, I'm like, oh God, another thing, creating, and I've been lucky that like I haven't been reliant on social media as a career move. And good so it's more just like, here are some pictures of my dog. It's a lot of like my dog and my hair, which I'm forced by my hair person.
Fair enough.
to post things. But it's just like, yeah, it's just been, I'm very lucky. I'm just very lucky.
At least it's not food porn.
No, yeah, I don't know how to. Also, when I take a picture, it's like somehow I make things look. I make things look really bad. I make things look so, it's just like, you're like, is that, I never ate at Michelin star places, but it's like, that looks like looks like a baby chewed it up and spit it out. How did you make it look so bad? And I'm like, dude, I don't know, man. It's yeah. Thank God I don't have to operate cameras.
Fair enough. Catya McMullen, thank you for coming on the Playwright Spotlight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this channel with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, and until we see each other again, keep writing.